Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadys.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. We have a very special guest with us today. Steve Fox has been involved with cannabis legislative reform for most of the last 2 decades. He was with the Marijuana Policy Project for 2 stints between 2002 and 2013. He's worked with members of Congress in support of action in the House. He is the co-founder of an organization called SAFER, that stands for Safer Alternative for Enjoyable Recreation, an organization dedicated, much like we are, to educating the public about cannabis and its use. He's currently serving as strategic advisor at the Cannabis Trade Federation and doing very important work there. Let's bring in Steve Fox. Welcome, Steve.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you with us. So can I, first of all, can I assume that your trade federation is not like the one currently at war with the Jedi for galactic supremacy?
That is correct.
Okay, different trades. Okay.
Yeah, but the person who started it, Neil Levine, is actually a Star Wars fan, so there may be some connection there.
Maybe some background to that. Right. Okay. Well, I want to ask you about the Trade Federation and everything, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, I'm always curious when I speak to folks like you who are in cannabis advocacy and education, and I'm always curious to know what motivated you in particular to get involved with this particular cause?
Well, I mean, to make it a relatively short story, I was living in D.C. And had just quit another job. I was in D.C. just to do more democratic, progressive policy work, and had just left another job and happened to see a listing for the Marijuana Policy Project, looking for a federal lobbyist. And it was something that I was interested in, something that I don't know that I had really thought that it would be a profession of mine, but something that I cared about. So, I'm very passionate about changing laws generally, and it seemed like a worthy cause to work on, so I dove right in.
Well, we're glad that you did. Now, tell me what was involved with the lobbying effort with MPP.
Well, my early years there, the first stint was 2002 to 2005, and I was really focused almost entirely on medical marijuana and raising awareness about that. When I was there, I worked with Rob Campia, who was running MPP at the time, and we helped get what eventually became known as the Rohrabacher Amendment. It's had a number of different names along the way, but the amendment that prohibits the federal government from spending funds to interfere with state medical marijuana laws, which is actually in effect as of now since 2014. But we started that in 2003 as a way of finally getting members of Congress on record by having this amendment introduced during the appropriations debate. It was something where the members could call for a vote, and then we'd be able to see who voted yes, who voted no, and we would then target those who voted no in order to just work toward a majority.
That's a really important step, and you see that a lot when you follow some of this legislation, is the roll call vote, getting folks to go on record, and then where they stand, who you need to where they stand and what you need to do. Sounds to me, is that about right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was all part of a coordinated strategy. MPP was working at the state level at the time, trying to push more states towards having medical marijuana laws, thinking that if the states became medical marijuana states, then the members of Congress would be more likely to support defending state rights at the federal level. And it's really something that's just been going on for 20 years now. And we're just seeing more and more support at the federal level being driven by laws at the state level being changed.
I think I know the answer, but let me ask you this. The National Cannabis Industry Association and the Cannabis Trade Federation, explain the difference. I would assume that you're more involved with legislation maybe, and National Cannabis Industry is more involved with the business side. Is that how you would describe it?
No. And I would note that I actually helped get NCIA off the ground in 2010.
Okay. Great.
And was one of the founders and was on the board for many years.
So you've been right at the epicenter of this whole thing for so long.
So, NCIA is an industry association. It has nearly 2,000 members. It's certainly more involved in trade shows and networking events all around the country. But it also does lobbying in D.C. They have a 3-person staff that is full-time and doing lobbying on the Hill. And what the difference with CTF, Cannabis Trade Federation, is it's really more of the larger players in the space getting together and pooling resources to strengthen the lobbying presence in DC. The CTF has 3 major lobby firms working on their behalf, one covering the Senate, one covering House Republicans, one covering House Democrats, and also has a full-time staffer in DC, and I am here as well doing lobbying and strategic advising and so on. So they're both ultimately working to change federal law. It's just CTF is smaller in number, but with many of the larger players in the space.
And for those folks for whom the word lobbyist and lobbying is not a pleasant word, just remember that what that means is petitioning the government for the redress of grievance, right out of the old Constitution. So. Yep.
No, it's not. They're not going to do it. They're not going to change the laws on their own.
All right, they don't happen by itself.
So, although I would say that we've had far more luck on the state level, at least overall, with ballot initiatives than working with the legislature. It's always a challenge to get things done through the legislature.
No big surprise there.
I understand you're a big part of writing up the legislation in Colorado for adult use. What have we learned from that, and how is that affecting legalization now as every state is rolling?
Yeah, that could be a long story in terms of what we've learned. We started in the very early years. You mentioned in the introduction the Safer campaign that we did. That started way back in 2005, and we set out then when adult use recreational cannabis was really nothing in the grand scheme of things at that point. We set out to change the culture in Colorado, help people understand that marijuana was less harmful than alcohol, and there was no reason to punish adults who chose to use the less harmful substance. And we did that for many years to change the culture there and make the ground fertile for an eventual ballot initiative. We did that, but along the way, Colorado also regulated the medical market in 2010, which was the first state to really have a full free market, but regulated medical cannabis market. And Colorado has just shown that this is really just what should be done. It's really not too complicated. We see the way alcohol is treated in this country, and during Prohibition, there was a lot of crime associated with it. You had dangerous products like bathtub gin and so on. And it made a lot more sense to have it regulated and sold in stores, taxed and regulated and so on. So that's what we've seen in Colorado. It's evolved into a functioning regulated market that we'll have about $1.7 billion worth of sales in 2019. I
think most people in the industry look up to Colorado as kind of doing it right, too, wouldn't you say? Compared to some of the other states. I think their rollout was pretty clean. And
Yeah, I'd like to say so. I mean, we were really involved in it. I also work with the Vicente Cederberg law firm, which is based out there and now has offices around the country. And that was part of it. I mean, we collectively have been very involved. I mean, we were very involved before that campaign. We collectively ran the campaign with MPP's financial support. And then we've been involved in implementation ever since, working hand in hand with the government and, both elected officials, governor's office, regulators, and so on, to try to be, a helping hand and help them understand what was happening in the industry, helping them understand that we want to do this right and work together. And, where there were issues to address, we helped them address them, even if it were some things that frustrated some industry members, like very early on when it was first, when the adult use market first opened, and there were some unfortunate incidents related to some folks over consuming edibles. We, immediately worked with the legislature to help establish the standard that they have now of having just a maximum of 10 milligrams of THC per serving. So that people wouldn't overconsume.
Steve, what are some of the other states that you feel are doing it right?
I guess probably Nevada. I mean, they're having some issues, with their testing program right now. I don't know if that's necessarily anyone's fault specifically, but overall, I would say they've done a pretty good job, which probably isn't surprising because that's a state that understands how to regulate and how to deal with quote unquote sin products, for better or worse.
Yeah, I've been to Vegas.
I mean, it really, Las Vegas and Nevada is about regulating products and generating tax revenue.
Right.
And they understood that and they said, okay, let's just do this. They very quickly, the states that are doing well are the ones that, just take the regulation seriously and don't try to overthink it in a way. Of course, we need to be concerned about public health and safety, of course. But, ultimately, the free market is ultimately the best way to go.
I have a quick question for you, and it's not terribly serious, but I noticed a few minutes ago you used the term marijuana. And this is a subject that comes up a lot on our show. We have listeners that are adamant about never using that word. It has to be cannabis. Mm-hmm. Steve D'Angelo was on a couple weeks ago with us, and we talked about it a little bit. And he said, he kind of made the point, it depends on where you are. If you're standing, in front of, a bunch of people that you're trying to convince that are in ties, then you maybe want to use cannabis. But if you're on a show like ours, kind of halfway having fun, marijuana is fine. What are your feelings on using the term marijuana?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly tend to use it in context. I sort of freely go back and forth. I do tend to use cannabis now almost all the time if I'm talking about what the industry is doing and just talking generally about the product. But if I'm talking about work that I did in 2003, I mean, it would almost be dishonest to call it cannabis or refer to that work as being cannabis because all I was talking about was medical marijuana at the time. Right. And our campaign was marijuana is safer than alcohol. So those were terms that I was using at the time. But we're evolving out of it. And I think it will just generally be known as cannabis. So, and I think it should be, but there are just times where it just makes more sense to just use the marijuana term because it's almost like,
well, it's been around so long. Yeah. And, but I think you're right, Steve. I think that is especially when products become marketed and, it's going to be billed as cannabis and cannabis products more often than marijuana, I would think. That's what I notice when I go to dispensaries. The products are called cannabis, and that's what it's going to the name is going to take on over time. That's just a prediction.
We never used that term when we were young. I mean, we're old guys, but did you ever call it cannabis? No, we didn't. I mean, until the last 10 years or less.
They called it dope, man.
So tell us more about the Federation. What type of members are you looking for, and how can people go about finding out more about joining the Federation?
Sure. Cannabis Trade Federation .com is a website where you can learn more or seek or request additional information. In terms of telling more, we're definitely working to get the work done in a professional and responsible way at the federal level. Also doing some work on the diversity, equity, inclusion front. Have put a really great task force together with the member, the head of the NAACP and the head of the National Urban League are part of it, and working with a diverse group of industry professionals, trying to develop a policy that can be adopted by different companies to ensure that they're taking steps to have greater diversity in the industry. But the heart of the work is really the lobbying that we're doing, and those who are interested in being part of the organization would be supporting those lobbying efforts.
We were talking about a lot of the industry leaders, some of the big corporations in the cannabis industry. Now they're concerned with lobbying, especially about the banking bill or packaging or something like that. And some people are saying they're sort of losing sight of the social issues. And do you see? And I totally understand that. But do you see do you still deal with a lot of social issues as well as issues that are going to be helping the industry? They in a sense, they go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Many of these larger companies, though, have become involved more because it's a business. They come from the business world and they're starting a new business. They haven't been exposed to the social justice side of things. So that's why we're taking steps as an association to do this work on diversity and inclusion. And we're also doing work at the state level. My real job is that I'm president of VS Strategies. The VS is an allusion to Vicente Cederberg. They're sort of affiliated companies, but VS Strategies does policy consulting, and we have different clients that we work for. And through VS Strategies, we're now coordinating a working group, coordinating stakeholders to really try to push something on expungement in Colorado, and that's supported by industry players. So it's a constant effort to get the companies to be more engaged in this important work, mm-hmm. And hopefully we'll be able to do more. But I assume you've picked up on the fact that the greater change right now is that you've seen really almost the entire Democratic Party embrace the notion that social justice needs to be part of the push for legalization. I'm not saying that's going to make things easier to reach compromise in certain legislative bodies, but it does seem clear that we're not just going to make cannabis legal, but some, if not many, of the past wrongs will be not righted completely, but addressed at least. Addressed.
Yeah, and that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. The expungement, the release. People should not be still serving time for something that's not illegal anymore, and especially something like this. So I applaud that effort 100%. And yeah, definitely have picked up that Democrats as a party are more engaged on that. I would like to see the Republicans, and that's kind of traditionally been my role on the podcast, is be the voice speaking, conservative-ese to the conservatives about, doing the right thing here.
Looking at the States Act and the Safe Banking Act, I know you're really involved with that. If the Senate passes the Safe Banking Act, will President Trump sign it? And do you think the Senate will pass it?
If the Senate passes it, if it gets modified, then obviously it needs to get concurrence with the House and stuff. But if it comes out of Congress, the president will sign it. We have no doubt about that. We've actually had conversations that make that a pretty solid bet. But the bigger question is what's going to happen in the Senate right now. Senator Crapo, who's chairman of the banking committee in the Senate, is holding things up. I'm not allowed to say that.
No, we can. We make fun of everybody.
But you can acknowledge that we said it.
Right.
Well, not only that, but Mitch McConnell, I'm sure you've run into the notion that, he's the Grim Reaper over there. Yeah.
No, he has no love for it. But I think if Senator Crapo was willing to move forward, I don't think that McConnell would stand in the way. But I don't.
Well, what are the chances
of for certain? But it seems, yeah.
What are the chances of getting Crapo to move for? I mean, he's so stringent in his stance. He's talking about maximum THC levels of 2 or 3% in any products, and how do you get past that?
Well, I mean, our hope is that paper was put out as the start of a discussion,
right? A negotiation,
and that the feedback he will receive is that that's simply not workable,
right?
And that he will continue to hear from the 38 attorneys general around the country who are saying we need this for public safety, the American Bankers Association, who obviously have influence among Republicans in Congress. They really would like to see this pass, and many other law enforcement officials and others on the state and local level, just really pushing for this for true public safety reasons. And
so if you can't make them see the light, we'll make them feel the heat.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject, since the Farm Bill passed, and then the FDA came back and sort of put the kibosh on putting CBD in food additives into food products. Now the bill came up with HR 5587, and that seems to be getting through the House. What are the chances of it getting through the Senate, do you think?
I don't know that I could set actual odds on that. I think it may be challenging. The committees of jurisdiction may receive some pressure not to allow CBD to be put into food products and dietary supplements without the proper FDA channels being followed. So I don't mean to be pessimistic. I just think there may be some hurdles there. But the FDA is supposed to be coming out with an enforcement discretion policy. I believe in the next 30 days, they're supposed to give some sort of indication of where they are. And I think they have until, I think it's right around April 20th by the calendar that they're supposed to have their policy. It was 120 days, and it was around
somebody
December
did that on
21st.
Purpose, Steve.
It might actually be the 18th. So it might not be as fun.
I say make it the 20th.
What
the hell?
Whatever. Yeah. So tell us again where folks can get in touch or be involved with the CTF.
Yeah, just CannabisTradeFederation.com.
All right, there it is. Well, Steve, we really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. This is all very, very informative, enlightening stuff. We're really glad to hear a lot of stuff that, frankly, kind of surprised me, but I'm glad to hear. And
they do have a great website, by the way. There's some good take action stuff on there, and you should go check it out.
We're going to include that URL on our show description, so please do check out Cannabis Trade Federation.
Well, what can our listeners, or what can we do to really help reform cannabis laws, especially us being in D.C.? I know we're all really busy, but one of our New Year's resolutions was to get more active and get out and get face to face with people. Anything you recommend?
Yeah, I would sign up for the Marijuana Moment newsletter so you're educated. I would sign up for alerts from organizations like NORML and MPP, and then from those groups you'll find out what's happening in your part of the country and have opportunities to get engaged.
And all of our listeners should call their representatives.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Those groups will tell you how and when and so on, or you can just go to their websites now and find out how to take action.
Thank you very much, Steve. We sure do appreciate it once again. And let's keep in touch. And we'd like to have you on again at some point. We hope we can do that.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Well, that was very enlightening. I was very pleased to hear some of his prognostications about who would and who might not support this. I like what he had to say about Trump probably would sign it.
Me too. I was surprised.
McConnell probably would let it go through if our friend Crapo would let it go through. But this was...
he's a heavy hitter, man.
Yeah, he sure is.
Yeah, that's actually... Because you texted me today and said that he was going to be on the show. And
we were like,
when I first got that, I didn't realize who it was.
That was like 2 hours ago, Andrew.
I know. But then I did the research and realized this guy is like the real deal. Yeah. He's a heavy hitter. He's the guy that actually wrote up the Colorado legislation to legalize the first adult use. And he's like so down to earth.
Yeah, he's historic.
Yeah, right.
He really
this
is.
Guy's like a big deal. He's a closer. He was a part of the team that crossed the finish line first.
He's not
Colorado
like he's not a Steve D'Angelo that's out on the camera all the time and really an excellent spokesperson. He's a behind the scenes guy, but if you look into it,
he's a get it done guy.
Yeah, he's a heavy hitter, man. This guy's done it. He's had a lot to do with legalization.
Well, it seems to me he's the closer.
He is the closer,
you know?
exactly,
Yep.
and he gets
coffee.
They're real involved in the States Act and the Safe Banking Act. And for those of you who may not know exactly what that is, not that we're legal experts, but the States Act basically says that any business or person that is operating or acting in compliance with their state cannabis laws is not violating federal law. That's what the States Act says.
And it's particular to cannabis.
It's particular to cannabis. So it says if you're doing the feds can't come in and arrest you for selling weed in a licensed dispensary if it's legal in your state, essentially, or anything else related to that. The Safe Banking Act basically addresses the lack of access to banking. We've talked about it. You probably know what that is, having to use cash and all that. So it opens up those avenues for businesses.
Now, the States Act is not law at this point, correct?
Right.
And now the federal government has said we're not going to prosecute that kind of thing, but it hasn't been enacted as a matter of law of the land at this point. The States Act hasn't been passed in law, neither has the Safe Banking.
The States Act is in committee now. It's in like a dozen committees, so you know how that shit goes forever. The Safe Banking Act has passed the House, and it's sitting in the Senate waiting for them to get rid of this impeachment shit so they can do something. It's just sitting there on the desk with a million other things. So the Safe Banking Act has the potential to pass with maybe a few changes this year through the Senate. And like he said, he says he has word on good authority that the president would sign it in a heartbeat. So that's great news, man. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that is good news.
Yeah, that's awesome. So anyway, that was a good interview. Good get, Phil. Good get. He was great.
Thank you for joining us. If you liked the podcast, share it with a friend. Let somebody know about it because you're getting all this great information. They should be getting it too, dude. See? Just saying. And give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts if you get a mind to. It would really help us out. What else, Jay?
Send us an email. Please send us an email at podcast@VoteProPot.com. We love getting emails.
Oh, you know what? Speaking of which, I'm going to cut you off right there.
Yeah?
Because we did get an email, and
an email, like
I'm going to read it.
Okay.
This is from our friend James Russell, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll just read the parts that are salient parts here. Episode 93. Episode 93 was so funny. Phil's rant on Tucker Carlson was great. What about the children? So we have a neighborhood app down here. I'm sure they're everywhere. Anyway, there was a poll on it asking if you agree or disagree on legalization of cannabis. He said, but as usual, the question came up in the comments and about other states having so many problems with edibles and children getting a hold of them and go. He said, this was perfect for me to respond to. I let them know all the facts and how you have to be responsible adults.
There you go.
I used many of the talking points that y'all bring up in your podcast. So far, I'm still waiting on a response from all the anti-cannabis people, but I don't think I will because they just can't make a point. So, James, thank
James
you.
Is the man.
I mean, we are. He is using our tactics in the world at large, and I'm really grateful.
James is down
to
in
hear
Texas, right? Isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah, Texas. Good luck with that, James. All right, where was I? Last Prisoner Project. Please go check it out, lastprisonerproject.org. And we have a message line, 240-257-2441. It's up and running again. Call, leave us a message. Let us know what you think of the show. Give us ideas, and we will play it on the show.
There's so much going on in the cannabis industry and the world of cannabis that we can't even come close to scratching the surface on our podcast. So we try to share a lot on social networking. So please go to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Twitter? What the hell's that?
Twitter? I barely knew her.
And Twitter. And do a search for VoteProPot.
Lock me up. Find me good. Label me a menace to your quiet neighborhood. I don't grow no plants. The state says I can't. That's not freedom. 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 That's the point. Smoke a bowl. I roll a joint. Do what I want. If I hurt nobody, that's the point. And if I want to get high, why shouldn't I? That's not freedom. 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 That's the point. Decide what's best for you and me. Smoke a bowl or roll a joint. Do what you want. If it hurts nobody, that's the point. So let's get high. Yeah, you and I. It's called freedom. It's called freedom, freedom, freedom. Oh yeah, that's the point.